Listen in as we work to uncover ways to help you live your life by design and challenge the norm by helping you go all in on your faith. And don't forget to leave a review and subscribe to the show on the platform of your choice. Let's go. Well, welcome back to the Kingdom Flow podcast. I'm excited about this interview for a lot of reasons. Our listeners know by now I've told some baseball stories, so they certainly know that I'm a huge baseball fan, and just really can't thank you enough for taking the time. So we've got the former president of the Houston Astros. We've got the current CEO, co-founder of Ryan Sanders Baseball.
Correct. Baseball.
Yep. And so, and so much more that I'm excited to unpack because you are a very savvy businessman. But we've got Reid Ryan, ladies and gentlemen, on the podcast today.
Thank you, guys. Glad to be here.
I also left out, because I'm sure you get this a lot, as a label of you are also Nolan Ryan's son.
Very proudly, Nolan Ryan's son. Yes.
It is definitely something to be proud of. But I'm excited to hear about your story. I know Ian is as well, and our listeners are too. And so anytime we get a great guest like yourself, we're just blessed to have you on the show. And I was listening to another interview that you had done, and today we're going to talk about you. Okay. But I do want to hear a little bit about what life was like with your dad, not only being a Major League Baseball player, but your dad was Nolan Ryan.
Yep.
So he's pretty well known. He's still pretty well known. Just give us a little quick snapshot of what life was like growing up as a kid.
Yeah, so I tell people, I really lived every kid's dream because I got to grow up in a Major League clubhouse. And, it was interesting because my dad wasn't really always Nolan Ryan, the photo of him with Robin Ventura punching him in the face, Texas legend. When I was born, I'm the oldest of three, and he was actually with the Mets. It was 1971. I was born in November, and he got traded in December to the California Angels. And so my life really from the time I was an infant, till we came to Houston full time in 1980 was we'd be in Alvin, and then in February we'd leave, we'd get in a truck, we'd drive to Arizona, we'd be in spring training there for 2 months, then we'd drive out to California, we'd stay there till October, and then we'd come back. And so the kids in Alvin, you gotta remember, no internet, no cable TV, none of that kind of stuff. They just knew that my dad played baseball, but they never saw him play. Yeah. Because there was no interleague play. Yeah. He's in California, if you got a box score, the games were coming on late. You didn't get them till the next day. So I had this neat childhood of growing up in Alvin, Texas, one high school town at the time with, multiple, aunts and uncles and cousins where everybody just treated us like, oh, yeah, hey, that's, Nolan's kid, or over there. They knew him from high school and pumping gas at the Chevron station and just being a local guy. But it really wasn't until 1980 when he signed that deal with the Astros to become the highest paid player in sports. And at the same time, the cable television boom happened where now everybody could see every single Astros game every night. And he really became a household name, and they made the playoffs a couple times, and then from there to the Rangers. So it was every kid's dream. I mean, I grew up hanging out with big league ball players and got to hit and throw in every major league stadium and would fly on team charters, had my own locker, had my own jersey. And, got to be a bat boy in '86 and the playoffs. And, my dad played so long that by the time he retired, I was playing college baseball, but Pudge Rodriguez and I were the exact same age, and he was catching my dad in the big leagues.
That's amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
That's amazing.
How long did he play for?
27 years.
Wow.
Yep.
And he got better with age, like a fine wine. He did.
And a little run support always helped.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. That's right. So how many times were you leaving a game or something, and he was like, hey, buddy, you can't repeat anything that you just saw in the clubhouse or like anything like that, like some adult level conversation?
Yeah, so I think, when you grow up in a major league clubhouse, like that happens early.
Oh, yeah.
That happens at like 4 years old, Yeah, what happens in the clubhouse stays in the clubhouse. And the other thing that was incredible about the childhood that I had, There used to be a saying in baseball, like the season's over now, we can go home and pick our own friends.
Yeah.
But over the course of a season, you had people from the Dominican, you had people from Mexico, you had folks that were, from the country or from the inner city, folks that went to college, some that couldn't get into high school. You know what I mean? Like it was all walks of life.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of great examples where my dad would say, hey, see the way he's acting? You don't want to do that. See the path he's going down. He'll have nothing in 3 years, or he's going to be, divorced and, or what he's going to have a drug problem or whatever. Like you literally got to see all of that as a kid. So it was just an incredible life growing up, and one that I feel extremely blessed to have got to be a part of.
Yeah. So take us back to just outside of baseball. What was it like in the home? Was he, especially just with in terms of your faith, like where did you find your faith, and what kind of man of God was he?
Yeah. So, interesting. I tell people that, I grew up wherever we were, we found that church that had monthly services. And what I mean by that was in Alvin, we grew up in the Methodist church, and everybody in our family was at the Methodist church in Alvin. It was before they had gyms and all the other kind of stuff, but like people would start going to Mother's Day out, and then you'd go to Sunday school, and your grandparents were there and your aunts and uncles were there. But then when you were on the road, normally in the baseball life, you're traveling around like I just shared, and you're in a different city, you can get traded, you're on the road. But my mom and dad made it a point for us to, hit church about once a month, no matter where we were. And so those lessons really set in of, making a commitment to go. But both my mom and dad grew up in Christian homes, and my dad's the youngest of 6. Their family was just very principled. And my mom is one of 5. She's the second oldest. And they had moved to Texas from New York, first generation Americans. And, they also were involved in church. And so we had a basis of Jesus in our life, enough in the background that it made me as an adult want to seek a personal relationship with him.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was your first experience as a kid where you felt like either the presence of Jesus or just that kind of encounter? Do you remember anything like that?
Well, yeah, I do. So in 1979, my dad's playing for the Angels. We're living in Anaheim, California. I was playing T-ball. I just got my first ever, T-ball jersey. And, it's not like today where kids have 5 uniforms with their names on the back. You got a T-shirt and we played in jeans.
Yeah.
That was it.
Like Sandlot style.
Yeah, and everybody had the same one. It was Villa Park Pee Wee, and one person got a green jersey and one person got an orange jersey. So I had my jersey on and I was out playing hot box. Once again, nobody had video games and all that back then, but where you basically throw down 2 bases and you practice rundowns with people in the middle. And some older kids rolled up on their bikes that didn't play baseball, kind of neighborhood bullies, and tried to grab my jersey and the other kids and take them from us. And as this kid ripped my jersey off, I sprinted away from him, and I ran across the street and was hit by a car and ended up losing my kidney and my spleen, broke my femur. And I just remember laying in the street, with the paramedics and my mom there, and just asking God not to let me die.
Wow.
And, here I am, 7, 8 years old at the time. And I just felt from that moment on that God had a purpose for my life. And, 10 weeks in the hospital, finally get out. And I just decided, like, from here on out, I'm going to live every day to the fullest, and I'm going to be extremely thankful, and that, God answered my prayers, and that I owe it to him to try to do something with this life.
That's amazing. So was that something that you had to reflect back on in that moment, or do you remember at that early age, like, that this is really, there's a bigger purpose to why you were saved from that accident?
So, yeah, without a doubt, there's a bigger purpose. I think my challenge in life, and I think a lot of people's challenge, is my selfish needs and desires with what God wants. And I think every time I've followed a path of what I want, he's gently corrected me back to the path that he wants.
Yeah.
And I have numerous examples of how that's happened. I mean, I went to the University of Texas on a baseball scholarship. Had always wanted to be a Longhorn. got to Austin, didn't study a ton, went out all the time, played baseball all the time, never thought about going to TCU, even though I got recruited by them because it was a church school, I thought, and a bunch of other things. And after 1 year, I found myself not very happy with, my baseball career, not very happy with my school career, not very happy with my life choices. And, the coach from TCU and I talked, and I ended up jumping in full force, and it was the best decision of my life. I ended up meeting my wife there and some of my best friends, and grew closer to God in the process. And, I can share numerous examples of all the way to losing my job with the Astros, which was kind of my, childhood dream job in a lot of ways, to, why God's plan for my life is not my plan for my life. Yeah. And so I think it all started when I got run over by the car as a kid, and I've been trusting him ever since then.
So I want to unpack that a little bit, because you and I share some similarities. My dad he was nowhere near a famous pitcher. But I did play college ball, and had a piece of humble pie given to me when I transferred from junior college up to Oklahoma State. And then that was the year that they told me that I wasn't good enough to play in Big 12 baseball, which I wasn't. But it was honestly one of the first times that I felt like I was rejected, just playing at high level. And I know that you were a good player as well, but you also had kind of this label to live up to, just being, who your dad was. Like, what was that like in that in-between phase? Like, do you remember what kind of feelings you were having?
Yeah. So, my parents are really special people, and sports has been a big part of our lives. My dad was a really good basketball player. He wanted to play basketball, but his baseball skills kind of, overshadowed his basketball skills. My mom is 2 years younger than my dad. She was a state champ in tennis in Alvin, and gave up, chances to play in college because she got married to him right after she graduated high school. My kids think it's gross, but they were going out when my dad was 15 and my mom was 13. So it's, not your traditional, in today's world of people getting married at like 30. My mom got married, I think, a week after high school graduation, and moved to New York with my dad. But they're both athletes, and, they've never pushed any of us kids in any one direction, but they've both been supportive in saying, look, all you can do is be the best you that you can be. And each one of us has a different skill set that God gave us. And very early on, my dad was like, look, God gave me gifts to throw a baseball 100 miles an hour. He didn't give you those gifts. But, he gave you other gifts that I don't have. Doing a podcast like this, getting up and, leading a team, being a public speaker, or even the way I pitched, throwing curveballs, changeups, and kind of pitching backwards. It took him many years. He was in his late 40s, or early 40s before he started throwing that way. So we're all different. He made me feel great about who I was. When I got released from pro baseball, so I played 1 year at Texas, only played in a couple games, transferred to TCU, ended up becoming all conference. We swept UT, won the conference. It was great. Went to Oklahoma State for the regional. We got knocked out by Cal State Fullerton back in the day. But, I get drafted. I play a couple years, and then I get released in my second spring training. It was kind of the third year to play. And I was depressed. And my dad goes, look, how many kids did you play Little League with? I don't know. Hundreds. How many of those made the high school baseball team?
Right.
I don't know, 6, 7. How many of those played in college? 2. How many of those played pro ball? Me. So you start thinking about it. If you played college baseball, Kyle, you're one of the best 10% of baseball players ever to play. If you play pro ball, you're a 1%er. There's only been, in the history of Major League Baseball, give or take, roughly 20,000 major leaguers. Not even enough to fill a stadium.
Yeah.
And out of that, there's 200 players, not executives and coaches and managers, about 200 players in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. So just wrap your head around that, of how many people have ever played baseball. So my dad very early on was like, look, don't compare yourself to me. Compare yourself to yourself. And if you're living up to the best you, then, you're doing great.
So on that real quick, because, I mentioned our sons play together, and then I have an older son who also has a team. We're in this very interesting, this has nothing to do with your story, but I am interested to get your perspective. We're in this very interesting time where travel ball is such a huge thing in every single sport. So give some parents some insight, like break those numbers down a little bit, because especially with some of the changes that they made in the NCAA, but it's now how difficult it is to go play at a 4-year school. And you mentioned that, but even like the people that can't go to college, like all these people, especially coming from these Latino countries and things like that, they're not going to school or 4-year school. Correct. They're going right into the system. So the difficulty, especially in terms of baseball, like, do you have any statistics on like those numbers on how many kids are actually going through that process?
Yeah. So let me, I'll kind of take a 30,000 foot view. When I was playing in the 90s, I get drafted in the 17th round, something like that, 15th, 17th round. And I get drafted and I go to the New York Penn League. And for the most part, everybody in the New York Penn League, it's short season A, we're all college guys coming out of, there were no high school kids. It was all college guys. So it's the same guys you've been playing summer ball with, same guys you've been playing against. And it was basically the same competition. I had like a ERA under 3, it was like, top 10 in the league in pretty much every category. And I'm like, I'm on my way, man. I'm going to be a big league, Well, then the next spring, I get to spring training, and there's 16-year-old kids from the Dominican, and they're literally 35-year-old dudes that have been playing 15 years, that are grown men with families and everybody in between. And you just realize, like, I was in a very small pond. I thought it was a big pond, but all these people that couldn't even get into college, they didn't get a chance to play in this pond. And that's when the reality that, like, there were a lot higher level of baseball, and I just didn't have enough fastball, at the time, throwing 87, 88, touching 90 every now and then to, be able to put a guy away. And, that's really the difference. And so if you take that backwards, my wife played college basketball. We met at TCU. She was starting point guard, and I came out to scrimmage them in practice, back before the men's team. And so we're both realists. We were really hard on our 3 kids, and they all played travel everything. But what we looked for in the travel ball experience was that we got to spend all our time with them, coaching, being with them, going to fun places. It was a commitment to the family first. Second, it kept them out of trouble. Yeah. Okay. But really, third, it was all the great life lessons of baseball and dealing with failure, learning how to work with others, learning how to set goals. If you make a commitment, you have to stick to the commitment, those kind of things. And so to us, the experience was the win in life for them. And my son played Division III. He is like Jim Abbott. He was born with cerebral palsy. He throws and catches with the same hand. He only played 1 year. He realized it was a lot of work for not a lot of playing. Yeah. And I think he set a goal and he accomplished it. And that was a huge life success for him. But his goal was to play. It wasn't to, hey, I want to be all conference or win something. He just wanted to prove to himself he could do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that was great. My daughters all had chances to play in college, but I think because they didn't wrap their identity up in themselves as a ball player, which is a big part of what happens with these kids. Mm-hmm. They had other sights in life, and they both got in the honors program at A&M and the business school, and they just wanted big school and wanted to go be an Aggie. And I tell everybody, I can't do everything right in life. I got 2 Aggie girls, but just kidding. I'm walk-on Aggie now.
There's no.
You start writing checks, and I was like, Maroon isn't that bad. I always tell them it was very hard to pitch at A&M. It's much easier to be a parent and go to football games. But, circling back to that, I share all that with, you just have to ask yourself why you're putting your kid in these programs. Mm-hmm. And if it's because you want to get them a college scholarship, you're probably got a lot better chance of saving the money and just putting it in an account
Right.
and letting them play league ball. But if it's because you want to spend time with them, be with their friends, and let them grow as a person, and then if it works out, great.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But
Right.
no kid should look at their life as a failure because they didn't get a college scholarship.
That's right.
So I'm new to baseball. My friend here's been giddy all week about this because it's just he loves baseball so much. But I'm new to it in this realm of travel ball. I had no idea coming from Louisiana how intense it was, right?
Yep.
And my son plays it, but I want to release some parents. You've been around a lot of ball players, young and old. What age do you start honing in on these kids can actually do
That's a good
something
question.
with the baseball? Because we play some teams, and my kid's 9, right?
Yeah.
He just learned to tie his shoes. Okay,
Yeah. You would think these parents believe that
they're ready to play tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm like, God, I didn't know this was real life. Like these people are
Yeah.
losing it. What age is it like, okay, you can see if this kid's got something or not?
Oh, it depends. Look,
Sure.
I think most of the time it's hard to gauge anybody until they're probably about 8th grade. You know,
Post puberty.
yeah, post puberty
That's-
because
we've been getting by all
it's,
the big
you know,
guys. Yeah,
it's the kid that grows fast,
Yeah.
or the one that the parents held back,
yeah,
or you know, I mean, there's
Yeah.
a little bit of everything. Or his dad let him throw a curveball, so he's dominating.
Real
but you know,
just talking about
yeah.
this.
So look, I really think
9-year-old.
it's when they get to be around 8th grade
Yeah.
or a freshman in high school.
Yeah,
You know, you're going to tell if somebody's really gifted. And look, I was not a guy that was extremely gifted, but I was extremely hard worker.
Yeah.
And just had massive tenacity.
yeah,
And you know, that's kind of the interesting thing about being in pro ball. And you were asking me earlier about pro ball. So when I was coming out, there were 40 rounds of the draft.
Yeah.
Before me, there used to be 70 rounds of draft.
Wow.
You know, they had draft and follow. They had unlimited draft at one time where people would draft you and then they'd say, well, go to junior college. And if you do well, then we've got your rights. Now there's 15 rounds to the draft. That's it. And they've cut 42 minor league teams. So it's just getting harder and harder. And the same with what's happening with college athletes today.
yeah. Float around.
You know, with everything. So look, I think if you go into it with the right attitude of, I'm going to learn a ton of life lessons. I'm going to spend a ton of time with my kid. And if it all goes well and he enjoys it, you know, my girls could have played a couple sports. They just didn't love it.
Yeah.
They did not. They were great softball players. They just didn't like being dirty, being on the dirt. You know, they were just sick of having dirt in their ears and nose and everywhere. You know, so you gotta love it, and it's got to go your way.
That's good.
Yeah, we faced a couple of 9-year-olds where they're snapping off these sliders like
Yeah.
I've never
It's
seen
wild.
before. It's insane.
It was wild. So I want to hear a little bit of we college baseball, son to Nolan Ryan. You know, I want to hear your salvation story, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Like when did you meet Christ, and what did that look like when you met him?
So you know, it's interesting. I've done a lot of testimony stories with people, and I'm like a slow bake guy.
Okay.
It was not like I was, you know, selling drugs under the bridge. You know, I just don't have one of those stories, you know. We went to church, grew up in Sunday school. I remember I was on a bus trip in high school, and we were coming back from Baytown, and back then you had to go through the tunnel.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like really like, you know, aging myself here. And they were working on it or something. And so we were kind of stuck for like 2 hours in this construction. And a guy went to high school with named Wade Amerson. We got into a deep, you know, conversation about Christ and about that if, you know, you don't accept him, you know, he's the only way through heaven. And so it was interesting because I think growing up, even though we were at the Methodist church, it wasn't as evangelical as like a non-denominational church or a Bible church. And so that kind of set with me. Fast forward, I go to Texas, and then I end up at TCU, and I get involved with FCA. And a guy on my team named Quinn Mentone, who was a pitcher for us, we would sit in the bullpen and have, with the whole pitching staff, these like, you know, you always wonder what these guys are doing in the bullpen. But when Quinn was there, it'd be like, okay, if I run into a burning building every day and save 100 babies and burn myself on 90% of my body, but I don't accept Jesus, I'm not going to heaven. And then we'd have these crazy
Wow,
debates with this guy with all kinds of people and perspectives. And so it was like slowly over time as, I got in, married and got to the church that we went to in Round Rock and started going more and that I just sort of grew into my faith that, you have to accept Jesus. He is the only way to the Father. He's the only way to heaven. And, I started becoming a Bible reader, kind of a self-learner. You go to the airport and they have that one little spinning thing with all the Christian books I'd always buy, But I'm a Bible app guy. As soon as it came out, I've had it forever. And whether it's things like the videos, the Bible Project, or just, every day at 8 a.m. I get a verse and, I read the Bible literally every morning at 8 o'clock and every night before I go to bed. Maybe a verse, maybe a little bit more. But I've kind of been just a lifelong learner. And I think going to Second Baptist for me was really, we wanted to go there because of our kids. But the more that I got involved with Ed Young, who's retired now, and other people within the church, it really sort of put a bow on my faith. And that's really when I just, grew even deeper.
It's amazing. You're talking a little bit about, your journey through baseball and pro ball. And part of my story, too, that I think you could relate to is my identity was truly wrapped up in being a baseball player. I did not have a plan B. And I ended up getting hurt my senior year, had a lot of time to think to myself, and just decided that it wasn't in the cards for me and decided to go ahead and graduate after that. So I never really came back and tried to play anymore. But it was pretty dark time for me. Trying to figure it out, trying to navigate it. I just ended up taking the first job that, where somebody wanted to hire me. And they just liked the fact that I was an athlete because I had experienced failure and, could overcome that and everything else. So what was that like for you? And how did that parlay into being a pioneer in building out this, basically minor league baseball within Texas? Because before you and your organization came along, there was only a handful of teams, not even a handful, less than a handful.
Yep.
There was 3, maybe 2?
There was San Antonio, Midland, and El Paso. Yeah, 3.
And now there's double that at least.
Well, and over the years there had been a couple others, but yeah, the Dell Diamond kicked off the growth of minor league baseball in the state of Texas. And whether it's Frisco, the new stadium in El Paso, new stadium in Midland, Sugar Land, any of the growth of like the Cleburnes and the Grand Prairies and all
that's right, the
independent clubs, the independent clubs, all the way to the new stadium in Amarillo. They all really kind of came out of the success of the Dell Diamond.
So what was that from the time that you got released to the time that you, because that was really the next step, right? Was kind of launching this organization.
Well, not quite.
No? Okay.
So I got released, and like you, I think when you realize your career's over, that it's not going to go where you want, it's a gut check. And no matter how much you think baseball isn't your identity and part of your life, it's a huge part, if not 100% for a lot of people. It is totally their identity. And I would fall in the category where it was, 70% my identity and probably 20% my destiny because of who my dad was. There was probably only 10% of me that liked other things. And so it was hard, very, very hard. And I came home, I worked out, I had a chance to sign with a bunch of independent teams. I held out wanting to play affiliated ball. And when that sort of everybody broke camp and now you're a month in the season, you kind of realize you got to go do something else. I was engaged to get married to my wife. And so at that point, I just decided, I'm going to go do something else. I just 180, cold turkey, turned the page. I had a degree in television production. And so actually the Rangers said, hey, we'll hire you right now to, be a sideline reporter, fill in. I got to do all of the Saturday and Sunday games when the guy there, John Radigan, was doing Cowboys and other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And from there, I started doing outdoor television. Then I started doing Big 12 baseball. And so I had a really successful TV career going within like a year, like snap of the fingers. But I wasn't fulfilled. And I remember one night I was sitting in the ballpark in Arlington waiting to do my hit, and I was just like, you know what? Why are there not more teams in Texas? It was basically the epiphany I had. So I came home that night. My wife was asleep. We were married by then, and I was like, hey, I know what I want to do. I want to go to Austin and bring professional baseball. Because when I had played the 1 year at UT, they had a group try to bring the club from Phoenix, because they were getting a big league team, to Austin, and it failed. And I had kind of watched. And so basically I went to school on like, why did this fail? Where are the teams? Who can move? How do you move? How much did they cost? Yada, yada, yada. And with really no business experience, talked Don Sanders, who's our partner still to this day, and my dad, Nolan Ryan, into being my financial backers. And, at 26 years old, I cut a deal to buy a club in the Texas League that just happened to be a Houston Astros AA club. And, went to Austin, Texas, and had a deal with the city of Austin, had a deal with the city of Georgetown, had a deal with San Marcos, and a deal with Round Rock, and decided to go with Round Rock because it was, the best deal. Two, we felt like we'd have our own identity and we wouldn't, sort of be under the shadows of, just a bigger town. And it was a better deal for us. And so my wife and I moved to Round Rock, not knowing one person. And next thing we know, we had to pass an election, and we were walking house to house, asking for votes. And we ended up passing the election in 98. We opened up the Dell Diamond in 2000, and I've been in baseball ever since.
Wow. That's amazing.
That is cool.
So, do you feel like where was, talk a little bit about maybe some of the vision that God gave you in those moments? Like, where did you see it? Could you see all of this where you're at now, or was it just kind of like that next step with the Round Rock Express?
I didn't dream that big, to be honest with you. I just wanted to work in baseball and be able to give fans, what I love about the game, and I talked a little bit about the being a player, excuse me, but what I love about the game is when you have a baseball team in your community, it's the community's front porch. It's where people come together to interact. And in today's world, even back in 2000, of, people, whether it's television or, American Idol, Survivor, whatever the show of the week was, and then video games and all these things. And now it's social media and the computer, and just there's not that many things that people do together anymore. And, what's great about baseball is grandparents and grandkids, moms and dads, fathers and sons, they can go and have something to talk about. Sports has always been that great uniter. Your town wins a championship, everybody's high-fiving, no matter what race, color, creed, age. People are hugging on the street. They don't even know each other because everybody wants the same thing. They want to have a place they're proud of. They want to have a place that they can go with their family and everybody have a good time and it still be all American. And that's what baseball is. And so I just really wanted to see this game grow. That was my only goal. And build a first-class stadium. And we built a major league stadium on a minor league scale. And it changed the game forever. And, we've continued to do it since then.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That is cool. So I am, like I said before, not fully aware of the baseball scene. But you were with the Astros for how long?
I was there 2013 through 2020.
And you said you were released from the Astros.
Yeah. Well, now, what I mean by that is I'll give you my full kind of resume. So got started in 98 when I bought the Houston Astros AA club. 2004, we bought a AAA team. When I say we, it's Ryan Sanders Baseball, my dad, Don Sanders, and myself. We bought a team in Edmonton and converted it to Astros AAA, moved it to Austin to the Round Rock market, and went down and passed and opened Whataburger Field in Corpus Christi. And so in 2005, when the Astros went to the World Series, our company owned the Astros AA and Astros AAA. So really anybody from 2000 up until the last couple of years played for one of my teams at some point and went through our system. Yeah. Then in 2008, my dad became CEO of the Texas Rangers. And then that team went into bankruptcy right after he got there. And I kind of helped connect him with a few people, Chuck Greenberg, and they ended up going out and winning a bankruptcy process with Major League Baseball, and then they own the Texas Rangers. And so in 2011, we switched our affiliation in Round Rock to Rangers AAA. So then we had a Rangers team in AAA, and we had an Astros team in AA. And then in 2013, Jim Crane asked me to come to Houston to be the president of the Houston Astros. And in 2013, my dad's CEO of the Rangers, and I'm president of the Astros. So that was a fun year.
That's fun.
We got to see each other quite a bit. They kicked the dog out of us. They were really good that year, and we were not very good. But that quickly switched in a few years. So my dad ended up leaving the Rangers at the end of 13 and then joined us with the Astros, and we were together 14 through 20, the World Series in 17, World Series in 19, and then COVID hit in 20, and then when, the sign stealing scandal happened, the owner of the Astros, ended up moving out the GM, Jeff Luhnow, and our manager, and then eventually he moved me out and just wanted to kind of reset. So it was a great run, 8 years. COVID was going on, so God's plan's better than my plan.
Right. And
I got to say, getting quote unquote released or fired or contract not renewed wasn't the first time for me in baseball because I had it as a player. But I think this was harder because everybody in Houston, my hometown team, where I grew up and where I was born, I still live here. I know everybody, and people really enjoyed the job I did with the Astros for a lot of reasons. Yeah. And I think that's missed what I brought to the table. I tell people there wasn't anyone in the organization from when it started in 1965 until I left in 2020 that somehow I didn't have a personal relationship with. And that's so rare.
Yeah.
And they don't have that now, but it's Jim's team, and he can do what he wants, and I totally respect. He brought his son in, and they've had great success since I left, so I'm happy for the fans and for them. But it was really, really a special time. But it was hard. It was very hard. But thank goodness my identity was not wrapped up in that job. As close as it was, as I was saying, as a player, it was close.
Yeah.
It might have been 80% my identity. But I had two things going for me. My church family and my kids' school, they never looked at us as anything other than Jackson, Victoria, and Ella's parents. And so it was a great time to really dive back in, with our friends and family. And then once again, when one door closes, another opens. I've always wanted to buy the team in San Antonio. It's the oldest team in the state of Texas. It was started in 1888. They've been playing baseball in San Antonio. And it's a stadium that is the worst in the league. It's in the wrong part of town. And we're working on a project to bring it downtown and make something that's world class and really be at that level of all these other stadiums, that you guys were talking about. So this is kind of another legacy project for me where, there'll be people for years and years and years down the road bring their family out and have a great time and not know all the struggles it took to get it there.
Yeah. I love that part of your story too, and thank you for sharing that because it just goes to show you no matter the age or success, right? We always have to continually be checking ourselves and where our identity is and how we have to find it in Christ. As I've been, going and growing and doing different things, all good things, but you just got to check yourself because it can be a slippery slope really quick. Mm-hmm. And if it's not rooted and grounded in Christ, it can be pretty dangerous, pretty quickly. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. The reality is, you're like, oh, the worst thing that ever happens to me is I'm president of the Major League Baseball team in my hometown, and then I don't get to be anymore. Poor pitiful me. That's really not a bad day.
No, it's not, but it's still,
it's really not a bad day.
Not.
So in the big scheme of things, like, it wasn't on my time frame. I would have loved to have got another World Series, but at the same time, like there's chapters of life and God has a lot of plans for me and my family. And we were the right people at the right time with Hurricane Harvey. And now we're the right people at the right time to do something in San Antonio.
Yeah, that's good.
We were so close in 2019. We were close.
Crazy. 18 was a better team. 18 was the best team.
Who do we lost to Boston?
Yeah, Boston. There were a lot of weird things that happened in that series. But anyway.
Well, I want to, we're closing in on the end here. I know you've got to run, but I do want to hear a little bit more about that the aspect what Ian was just mentioning and making sure that you're kind of detached from that. I'm sure you can't remain or keep that in check without some level of accountability in your life. So that's a big thing that we talk about, is just having accountability. That could look like a number of different things in our life, but talk about, like, if, how do you, who holds you accountable? Is it your wife? Do you have a group of men at church? Like, what does that look like in your life in terms of mentors?
Yeah, my wife keeps me in check. I'm married to a lady that is not afraid to bust your chops. She's an athlete, and she's, the reason we have such great kids. And, she is not a fan of the pity party at all. So she gives you about 1 second of grace. That's about it. But, Nicole and I have a special relationship, and
you almost 30 years, right?
Yeah,
Did I read that?
Yeah,
Awesome.
Exactly. Well, we got married in college when she was still in college, so we will be 29 in October this year.
Go.
And so it's been great. But I'm blessed. My parents are still alive and doing well, and my dad is a great spot for common sense to go. He just has such a common sense approach about him. And I have a few other people that I got a buddy in Austin, Jeff Ziegler, who we met in a business group, and he's been somebody that we keep it real with. And so I think it's super important. You never stop.
That's
never
right.
stop.
That's right. Well, what are you looking forward to right now? Like, what's next? I'm enjoying this empty nester phase. So Jackson's 25, lives in Austin, works for the Round Rock Club. Victoria's 23. She lives here in Houston, works for Deloitte Consulting. And then I've got Ella is 20, and she just finished her sophomore year at A&M. And so Nicole and I, I'm 53 and she will be 50 in June. We're in good health. We play a lot of tennis, play a lot of golf. We like to travel. And so as much as we're still working on this project and some other ones, when you do all the kids' sports and you put your life into their activities, when they grow up, you're like, wow, we got a lot of time on our hands. What are we going to do here, And so we both love sports. We have been going out and seeing all of the tennis majors. Oh, wow.
So in the last 3 years, we have clicked off Wimbledon, French Open, and U.S. Open, and we're going to Australia in January.
Really cool.
So we'll have all 4 of the majors. And then we started talking about we want to go do golf next. But I think there's just something about we're attracted to, big-time sporting events where people that have worked their whole lives are in that moment.
Yeah.
We've got to live it as, running clubs and being a part of clubs. And we've seen the highs and lows from when my dad was 1 strike away, twice winning the World Series in 11, to us not winning a single home game in 19, to when we were going back to LA and thought there's no way we're going to win this, and we won it. So we just love those big time events, and we're going to try to keep doing them and traveling and having fun. But this project in San Antonio will be 2028 probably when we open it up. So it'll be about a 5.5 year project, the longest baseball project I've ever been a part of. And so at the end of that, we'll see what God has in store for us. But right now, that's what I'm working on.
That's a big one. That's
so
a really
cool.
big one. Well, is there anything that you wanted to hit on that we haven't asked you about? We always like to.
No, guys, I just appreciate
yeah.
the opportunity. I think having men like yourselves out, putting your faith out there, and growing the kingdom through shows like this is super cool, and I'm just honored you guys reached out to me.
Well, thank you so much for taking the
appreciate
time.
it,
We know
man.
you're a busy man, and
Yep.
I've just enjoyed the conversation.
I have
today.
too.
Yeah, it's been
good.
great.
Good.
Well, would you do us the honor and close us in prayer?
Yeah,
and seal the
happy
moment? Yes,
to.
Thank you.
All right. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this day. Thank you so much for these men and for what they're doing to grow your kingdom. Lord, just please bless them and their families. Bless this podcast and all those who listen to it. And we just thank you for your son, Jesus Christ, who died on the cross to forgive us of our sins. And in his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for listening. We hope that you feel encouraged by today's episode.
Help us reach the masses by leaving a review and subscribing to the show. We'll see you next time.